do you know it's supposed to be over there?
It's just always over there, the
On
left
right
side.
far right of the,
On its own right,
yeah.
on the flag's right.
Yeah.
So if it was out there, it would be over here.
Oh.
That is the right side though.
That is the right side for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
now you throw me off with far right. though.
And that's the correct side too.
Well, when she asked me if I wanted to do the pledge, I looked up there and I didn't see the flag. I was like, oh, where's it?
Pledge to what?
Remind us of base here too. On the city flag.
Okay, we're live.
Well, now, it's a little good. Look at the swords
Oh,
proud.
it's only 1 minute.
Yeah, look, the eagle is like
My
Oh.
phone is
not landed.
You got a broken foot.
Yeah.
Dang it, this was lining up. Doug, we're live.
We're live. Okay, I hereby call this meeting to order. I would like to thank tonight's presenters, everyone joining us in person, thank you, and via Facebook Live. And Bart Reed will help present or lead us in the pledge.
If you please follow me, I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bart. Okay, all of our board members are present. There are a couple of addenda items, which include additional information on human resource activity, recognitions, media report updates, relations updates, presentation of proposed revenue and expenditure budgets for 2021, 2022, kindergarten registration update, and a wellness dashboard update. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the addenda.
I move that we approve the agenda with the addenda.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed. Next is the approval of the minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes, but I should probably read those first, shouldn't I? It's a special meeting, work session, and executive session, student discipline. That was on May 11th, 2021. An executive session personnel on May 18th, 2021. Regular board meeting, public hearing on May 18th, 2021. And an executive session, student discipline, May 25th, 2021. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes as read.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed. Next is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes authorizing the payment of claims, approving the supplemental financial information, and approving the amended human resources activity. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda
I'll second.
and with the amendment on the human resource.
I'll second the motion.
Everything fine? Okay,
I
Okay.
second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed. Next item is Courtney Fisher will present the June recognitions.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, trustees, Dr. Howell, and Ms. Johnson. Normally, we do not have recognitions in June, so tonight we have a special recognition, recognizing individuals who, through their actions, support and embody our district's mission to think more, learn more, and be more together. So as you may know, starting in June of 2021, the Idaho School Boards Association is starting a School Board Appreciation Month to celebrate its school board members across the state. So I believe you all got an email with a certificate, but we wanted to acknowledge that receipt of that certificate this evening with you all. And it reads, Idaho School Boards Association honors the school board members of Pocatello, Chubbuck School District 25 for their dedicated leadership in public education and continuing service to the children of this community. We commend you for the countless hours you dedicate to benefit Idaho Public Schools. And on behalf of School District 25, we wanted to just share a small token of gratitude and appreciation with you for your service to our local community and our local learners. So thank you so much, and congratulations on this recognition.
Thank you.
And I have a certificate for each of you.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you.
Cool. Fun.
I don't believe you have our water bottle yet, and everybody needs one.
Okay, that's good.
Everybody needs a more together water bottle, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Pour your water in it and turn
Or,
it to the camera so everybody can see our More Together logo.
thank you, Courtney. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you
your
very much.
service. And that concludes our recognitions this evening, so thank you so much.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Blush. Next on the agenda is public written comment on topics not pertinent to the agenda. And we have one in our packet. Everyone's read that? Okay, good. But would you like to speak to us today? No. Okay, all right. No, but okay. So we'll move on then. I'm not receiving any requests. The next on the agenda is the media report and community relations update provided by Courtney Fisher.
Now that school's out, I just have a very brief report for you from over the last month. So the following education topics have frequented recent news since we last met in May. Graduation, lots of great stories about graduation to celebrate the class of 2021. We've had lots of stories, media coverage on the legislative recap. Levy election updates. Our neighbors in Idaho Falls were able to pass their levies this time after they failed in March. We just recently had a celebration of life for renowned Pocatello High School teacher Ahmad Delkhani, so I would direct your attention. It was a really wonderful article about him and his service to School District 25 and Pocatello High School. We're also paying attention to the media coverage about the Lieutenant Governor's Indoctrination Task Force, and then Idaho is on track for record budget surplus, so the governor's been calling for ed boosts and more tax cuts, so we're paying attention to that as well. Our live streaming for board meetings in May, for the regular board meeting, we had 544 views, which is pretty good. Social media over the past 28 days, we are just under 10,400 followers on Facebook, about 425 followers on Twitter, 1,100 followers on Instagram, and 285 subscribers on YouTube. Our website, as we would expect during this slower time of year, it's gone down. So we've had 17,000 users over the past 28 days and 30,000 sessions, which is still pretty good. We were at 39 in between April and May, so people are still looking at our website. And in the interest of time tonight, I just wanted to show you the top 5. 53.8% of users are still accessing our site via mobile devices, so that number continues to climb upward. And then our most visited page is Home, PHS, HR, which we have several positions available that we've been trying to fill. Our summer food program, which that menu is being accessed on both online and our social media pages. And also all of our district forms, lots of people calling about transfer still and trying to figure out where they're going to be and where their kids are going to be in the fall when we return to school. Our most recent podcast was called Now Hiring, so we wanted to really highlight all of the positions that we have available and kind of that process and really get that information out there. So we had more than 100 listens to that one, so that was really good for that topic. As far as additional communications and community relations activities, we are planning a district hiring fair in partnership with Brenda Miner and Human Resources for July, so I will make sure that you get information about that, working in conjunction with departments so that we can have it out in our parking lot, make it a little bit festive, and do some fun things to really entice people for working at School District 25.
Pick a day that's not so hot.
Right. I will certainly try. Middle of July, I'm not too hopeful. We're also working better to anticipate the timing of for when people want information for back to school. It usually hits right around the tail end of the 4th of July holiday, and so that back to school information is already up. So trying to anticipate calls and head those off a little bit so that information is right on the homepage for when the first day of school is and all the other goodies that come with back to school initiatives. And then we're working on additional website improvements, and I'll share more details with you about that next month.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No?
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Okay, now it's time for the presentation of our proposed revenue and expenditure budgets for the 2021-2022 school year, and these will be presented by Bart Reed and Carl Smart.
Thank you, Chairman Mattson, members of the board, and Superintendent Howell. We are pleased to be able to present the fiscal year 22 budget to you. Just by way of public information, we did meet with the board this past week. I think it was on Wednesday, and had a more extensive discussion of some of the details in regard to next year's budget, which was some good discussion and good information to have. Make sure this works. We are just going to go over quickly some of the highlights and some of the main parts of next year's budget with you tonight. And if you have any questions, certainly feel free to ask them with us. One of the things as you look at this budget comparison, the fun comparison between last year, this current year that we're in, and next year in fiscal year 22, one of the things that's fairly obvious is that our largest fund is the general fund, comprising nearly 70% of all of our revenues and expenditures in the district. That kind of goes without saying, and that's fairly comparable to prior years. The other two major funds are, believe it or not, our school plant facility fund, which makes up almost 10%. And then our federal programs has grown substantially since we've been through COVID and an influx of federal revenue. And so that is up to 10%, which all of those combined are roughly 90% of our overall budget for all funds. Under this next history of fund categories, some interesting parts that we'll just bring up. If you look at the general fund, you can see that our general fund revenue for next year is projected to be about $2.3 million more than the current year. So that's good news that we are increasing in general fund revenue through the state. And as you know, the state had a fairly good year that we'll talk about a little bit later in regard to probably more state revenue collected above their projected budget than they have ever had historically. So that bodes well for education and for the state as well. One other thing that we want to bring out on here is under federal revenue. You can see in fiscal year 21, we had nearly $21.8 million of projected revenue. And for next year, it shows 13.3. But again, we would remind the board that there is another $18.5 million of ESSER 3 funds that we have yet to budget for this next year, just because we have not had that discussion, haven't figured out quite how we're going to spend that money, and have to go through some of the guidelines and compliance requirements with those funds. So that will be an adjustment in this forthcoming year that we will make. But if you added that $18 million, we would exceed the $21.8 million that it shows in this fiscal year. So that's important to know. All the remaining other categories there are fairly comparable to what we have had in the past years. This just shows some of the different funds that are included under local, federal, and state fund, which are our three broad categories, how we show revenue. Just a couple of notes here. Under the middle column toward the bottom, you'll see McKinney-Vento. That is a program that we've had through other grant funds, but specifically we did receive this grant for the next 3 years. It's not a large amount of money, but a new grant program, and that is a federal grant program. And then you see at the bottom of that same column there the ESSER funds, which is the influx of COVID funds which have come to local school districts throughout the state and across the nation. Just a maybe special note in the last column under state fund, our driver's education fund, we are still listing that program. But this summer we were not able to operate that program because of the lack of certified drivers for that program. So we are working on trying to get that back reestablished and see if there's interest in staff that will participate in our driver's education program so we can continue to offer that. So just a note there that we are still working towards that end.
I did see 3 driver's ed cars in the parking lot.
Well, we do own driver's education vehicles, so yes, those are our vehicles, and we purchase them because it's much cheaper overall much less expensive to purchase the vehicles and have them for a number of years and use them for our program than it is to lease the vehicles from a dealer. So those are currently district-owned driver's education vehicles that you've seen there. This next slide shows all other funds, are all other funds other than the general fund. And just a couple of notes on this. You'll see that the beginning balance has gone down from $13.4 million to roughly $8.4 million. That is largely due to our school plant facility fund being drawn upon for the construction of the Pocatello High School project. So the majority of that expenditure has occurred during this fiscal year. There'll be 2 or 3 months in this next fiscal year that there will be a draw, but that's why that fund balance has gone down in the other special revenue funds, just so that you are understanding of that. And then under the other federal revenue, you'll see that that's down, but again, that will go up as we make that adjustment for that $18.5 million of ESSER 3 funds. The only other comment that I would make is if you look under salaries and fringe benefits there in the second to last column, in the last column, you'll see that salaries were $12.5 million roughly, and are shown at $7.3 million for the following year, and kind of a corresponding relationship with fringe benefits. The reason for that is that, remember when we started this year, we had a governor's holdback, and there was no increase in salary by way of movement on the salary schedule or in the career ladder. Later, just a few months ago, the governor changed that and put money into the career ladder, and we went through all of that discussion and negotiate, had to reopen negotiations. When they decreased the discretionary unit value, $6,000 roughly, that was about $3.6 million for us, and that money went back into the career ladder, into salaries and benefits. You'll see the reason that that is much higher is that we used the ESSER 2 monies to fund that loss of revenue that it was to our budget. And so you'll see that's why that's much higher in this year and will go down for next year in fiscal year 22. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. With that, I think that that's all the discussion we'll have in regard to the special revenue funds. There's a couple more slides here about the revenues overall and the expenditures, but I know that you've had an opportunity to look at that. So with that, I will go ahead and turn this over to Carl, and we'll have some discussion about the general fund.
Where are we at here, Bart? There we go. General fund, of course, is our largest fund in the entire budget. And this year, we're anticipating it being about 70% of the entire budget. So it's a significant number of dollars that we are in charge of, and we try to use those funds judiciously as we go from year to year. And looking at this, you can almost say I can get a little whiplash looking at some of the numbers here, because they go up and they go down, they go up and they go down. And it's basically due to the governor's holdback and the reassignment of those dollars to the ESSER funds. And so you can see that generally we have an increase on the expenditures, just as we would normally see, because of the increases in the salary-based apportionment. And we try to follow the salary-based apportionment and allow salary increases that are matching those numbers from the state. But overall, you'll see the expense side has been fairly, general increases, but the revenue side, where the state revenue and federal revenue are kind of whipsawing all over the place. revenue comparisons, this is just basically how it breaks down from one year to the next. It's very similar. The state's contributing a little bit more in the way of general fund dollars this year than it did last year, and of course that's due to probably that 5% holdback a year ago in the fiscal year 2021 budget. I talk about this year and yet last year. I'm already in the next year, and so I apologize if I talk about last year as being the current year. But comparing other funds to general fund, you see the breakdown of how the federal dollars come through or the state dollars come through is very different in these two fund mixes. And so, of course, the state contributes most of the funds for the general fund, and the federal, of course, for the other funds. Bart's already discussed that. In the general fund, just shy of 88% of the general fund is spent in salary and benefits. And so, as we discussed, where would we cut if we had to cut? Of course, that discussion, we've not had to have that this year, but if it were to come to that, of course, the bulk of those dollars would have to come probably from salary and benefit if we were ever having to do that. And it's the same story this year as it is in previous years, but it's not unique to us. We are an employee-heavy industry, if you will, or company, and so most of the funds will go to pay salary and benefits. Of course, the breakdown of if you compare the funds to general fund is very different as well. You see that because of the capital objects from the school plan, that's it's very different because of that one fund and the supplies in many of the other federal funds. As we have talked over the last several months, we talk about enrollment and how that's going to drive the number of units we have. And as you can see here, from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021, we had a significant drop. And that, of course, would have driven us a significant drop in the number of units that we were funded for. But the state was able to change their rule, and they funded us on membership rather than ADA. If we would have been funded on ADA, our number of units would probably had a decrease of about 80 units. And because of membership, we were pretty much status quo from the prior year. And as we look out in years 22, 23, 24, and 25, that's kind of how do we put this, a false negative, because we anticipate some of those kids coming back, and so it'll start climbing again. But just because of the way my cohort is built, it looks at the current and projects from there. I have seen news articles where not only we, but other states are going to anticipate getting a significant increase in their kindergarten students. They saw a 6% decrease last year because of the COVID. Now we're going to get many of those kids back plus some. So we'll see when it comes around to September how many of those kids come back. But this drop was significant because it determines how many units we're going to have next year and how many we're going to try to budget for, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then, of course, this is the actual numbers that drives that chart. State Funding 101. We've been through this a number of times. There are two major funding mechanisms of the state funding formula. One's entitlement and salary apportionment. And when you talk about entitlement, you know, it almost sounds like we're entitled to something, and that's not really what it's meant to be, is how much per unit you get for things that aren't salary based, so supplies and insurances and whatever it might be. Both are based on units, which is a result of students' average daily attendance over a period of time. For salary apportionment, it's the first reporting period, which ends at the first part of November. For the entitlement or the unit values that we get funded for, it is based upon best 28 weeks. A unit can be likened to a classroom. General fund revenue estimates were made using 583 units for salary apportionment and 577 units of it for the entitlement funding. These numbers are minimum values and reflect the number of protected units. Remember that from one year to the next, you can decrease up to 3%. This reflects the 3% because we have no idea where those kids might be when they come back, if they come back. So we erred on the side of being on the low side rather than high side because it's easier to add money than to take money back in the future. So these numbers reflect protected units, so 3% off of this year. What might change is if the state renews that rule change going back to average daily membership rather than the average daily attendance. If it goes back to membership, we might be very similar to where we were this year. But it's one of those things we just don't have a clue about.
Carl, maybe I could just interject and
Sure.
Dr. Howell, if you have a comment, but I believe that this budget, as far as the number of staff that we have projected going into fiscal year 22, is similar or the same as what we have nearly this year. Is that correct? We did not do any reductions necessarily for next year?
Correct. So we planned with the ESSER money, and as we brought that to the board with one of those budgets, in fact, that we would hold on to about 9 units, protecting our own, if you will, through those federal ESSER dollars. So we will be very close to where we would have been, and anticipating that those children may come back and not knowing what the funding sources will be. But I think we're in a good place. Thank you, Mr. Reed.
One question I would have there is, do we have any comparables across the state for how other school districts fared during this time with their attendance and enrollment?
From what we have seen and heard, is it was pretty much across the state there was a drop in those brick and mortar schools. The online schools saw an increase. And it's yet to be determined if those families are happy with that change they made to go to the online schools or not. So that's one of those things we don't have a real handle on right now because they're not required to come and register with us right now.
Well, and I don't know but we did report everything based upon enrollment this year as opposed to attendance. So that's going to be an anomaly in comparing that, but I'm assuming that we still send in, did we even send in ADA through IC?
Yeah, we do.
So I don't know if the state will use the ADA information, which is going to be really skewed because of COVID, or if they're going to use ADM, which is enrollment, which is also going to be skewed in comparison to previous ADA statistics. So it's going to be kind of a hard comparison, but Carl is right that overall it has decreased.
Just one
Go ahead,
more
Doug.
comment. And as you'll recall, board members, we have also talked to you about an increase in our enrollment since January. So once we came back after break, we saw a bit of an increase, and then even into March, we were probably up in total, I'm thinking it was around 100 students had returned to physical locations coming from online or charter locations.
Entitlement, this is basically operational funds from the state which support all areas of the budget, salaries, benefits, purchase services, and supplies. It touches every bit of that, the gamut that we run in our general fund. And this brings up the next kind of challenge that we had with creating this budget, in that we're not quite sure where the unit value is going to be, because we talk about the number of units based upon ADA, but we also have the number that is is multiplied by the unit value, which is, in the past couple of years, has been hard to kind of get a grip on where it's going to be. And this is just an example of where it has been over the last 3 fiscal years. The one we're going into, the current one, and last year. Last year in fiscal year 2020, the unit value as appropriated by JFAC, the financial committee there in the legislature, was $28,416, which was $935 over the prior year. If we multiply that by 600 units, which is, I just left it as 600 units as a base, we were able to gain $561,000 from that change in the unit value. In fiscal year 2021, the unit value started out at $28,887, which was a $471 increase. $282,000 of additional funding coming from the state. However, after the 5% holdback, we had anticipated it being about $27,556. Ultimately, after the legislature had done all of their tweaking with the budgets this spring, the unit value for the current year is $22,810, which is a drop from the prior year of $5,600, or about $3,300 or $3.3 million. And we had talked to you about that in our prior conversations about how are we going to cover that 3.3, and we've talked about it using ESSER funds. Now, for this next year, looking at these numbers, what's the challenge for next year? 2022, the legislature had set the JFAC set the unit value at $29,500 per unit, which would have covered basically that negative number from the prior year. However, there's a caveat in the legislation this year that says you will not draw any funds from the PISA, for the Public Education Stabilization Fund. So if there's a shortfall in the number of funds available to fund the districts and the what they have said they will do, it will come out of the unit value rather than being covered by the PISA. And so we have in the budget that we have created and set out there, rather than say we're going to fund the full $29,000 or receive the full $29,000 from the state, we're only going to receive a portion of it, because in the last 2 fiscal years it was short about $2,100 approximately. And so that's why you see a number up there on that final column for what we are going to budget as our unit value. Is based upon we're not going to be able to get PISA dollars to reimburse any shortfall, and it's basically where they came in short the last couple of years. Again, we did that not to overestimate our budget, but it's easier to cover extra than it is a shortfall. So that is where we came in this budget. We budgeted $27,367 per unit.
Conservative.
We're going to be conservative again.
And this gets back to our discussion that we had about the state somewhat directing local use of ESSER funds. This is a way for them to say, okay, you're not going to be able to take it out of the PSEF fund, so where's it going to come from? It's going to come from your ESSER funds, and that's part of, I think, I don't want to say their strategy, but their thinking about how they're forcing districts to use those federal dollars rather than use some state available funds.
Then our salary apportionment, our budget was built with some sort of salary increase in it, and it was based upon these numbers. Administrative salaries went up 2%, so did classified salaries in their reimbursement. The career ladder salaries are our current staff moved on the career ladder and what those average salaries might be. If we were to have our entire staff move and come back next year, we know we don't have the entire staff coming back in mass next year, so it'll change a little bit, but based upon our current staff, so we could do some salary calculations, that's what we did. The minimum salary for next year will be $40,369, up $369 from the current year. And classified base salary, just so you know kind of where that sits in the whole scheme of things, is somebody who works year-round, 2,080 hours and $11.16 an hour. Approximately 17% of our classified employees are in the general fund are paid less than the state reimbursement. 83% are paid more. So the state doesn't reimburse us a whole heck of a lot for classified salaries. And of course, the actual administrative base salary is adjusted by the experience. And so our actual reimbursement for administrative salaries will be about $72,000 per FTE. Here we have how it breaks down. We have a current revenue, of about $80 million. Our requested expenditures are about 83.8. So our expenditures exceed our revenues for current to current by about $3.8 million. We do have some fund balance to cover that shortfall, leaving about $10.2 million for distribution back to our reserves. $800,000 of it is going to go to contingency, $3.2 to an unappropriated fund balance, and $300,000 back to inventory reserve. So we leave $5.9 million to go back into unappropriated fund balance, which we could use for other things. We'll talk about ESSER money here again in a minute. We do anticipate being able to cover this shortfall with some of those ESSER funds, which is we look at a $4 million shortfall. Normally we'd be in a panic mode, but this year is a little bit different because of those federal dollars. Our life, vision, dental insurance had 0% increases. Our medical insurance went up 5.4%, or about $40.72 per employee per month. Overall increase for our insurance is about $500,000. Retirement sick leave, again, we have a payment holiday with PERSI for retirement sick leave. That is actually saving our general fund about $640,000 this next year. Historically, retirement sick leave has been about 1.25% of salary. All right, and Bart kind of touched on this. You want to talk about the ESSER funds any more than what we have here, Bart?
I don't think we need to unless there's questions, so.
Okay. As Bart mentioned, we believe the legislature intentionally crafted the budget this year so we would tap into those ESSER funds. And there are the three types of ESSER funds, 1, 2, and 3. Each of these different acts have different spending requirements and funding rules. That's what I was looking for. All of these funds are accounted for in the annual budget in funds 250 and 251 or 281. The use of the ESSER $3, and I don't remember who spoke to that. It was Bart or Doug. There's a significant amount of dollars there. The State Department of Ed is still trying to get their house in order with the feds to ensure that we are able to spend those. And then we have to also go through some hoops to be able to spend those funds as well. So when the funding authority is granted, then we will make some adjustments to our budget for that. In reality, we are in really good shape based upon the ESSER funds being available to us. The supplemental levy, again, was critical for us to balance our budget this year. And all of our reserves are at the required levels. And the last thing we need to touch on is our levies. Are we going to certified with the county here usually in September? We have our supplemental levy, the tort levy, and the school plant levy. Each one of those is in the budget, just like this. $9.25 million for the supplemental levy. The tort levy is a number that comes from our insurance carrier. It's about half of what our liability insurance costs with insurance company. And our school plan, of course, this is the beginning number for our new round of school plant funding. And so we have just shy of $60 million in revenue requests for our and our levies that we'll ask the county and the property tax owners to fund this next year. Typically, $229,000 of that those levies is covered by what they call a property tax replacement. We don't know what that is going to be based upon the changes the legislature did in funding this year, so we won't find that out until middle of next month or end of next month. And so some of the tort levy will be covered by those property tax replacement dollars. So we always request these numbers, and so they will be reported to the county in September. And that concludes our report tonight. The budget you have in front of you, you got a copy of the book, has been posted to the website, so it is available if anybody would like to get out there and review it on their own. And so tonight we're going to ask you to adopt the budget, give us spending authority, and also to certify those levies so we can do that with the county. So unless you have questions or comments, that concludes our report until...
Any questions? Anybody? Anything further? Okay, thank you, guys. I will now recess this meeting and convene a public hearing to solicit input on the proposed revenue and expenditures budget for the 2021-2022 school year. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this proposed budget? How long do we wait?
I said my piece, so...
Okay. I can now close the public hearing and reconvene the regular meeting. I would entertain a motion to adopt the proposed revenue and expenditure budget for the 2021-2022 school year, 2021-2022 school year. Is there a motion? And there is a
Stated motion here.
yes, would somebody read that, please?
Sure. I hereby move that the board adopt the Pocatello Chubbuck School District number 25 revenue and expenditure budgets, certify the levies, and authorize appropriation for the 2021-2022 school year per the attached resolution as if read into the minutes.
I'll second that.
Before we do that, should we read this resolution?
No,
As if read.
covers it, and I will put it in the
Okay, good. Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed. We will now move on to curriculum and instruction, safety and athletics. Lori, there you are. You have a whole list for us.
Yeah, I'll start with, I'm filling in for Mr. Minor on this first one here. So included in your packet is policy 6306, which is for first reading. It's the special education for students with disabilities. And then there's a procedure there that is also included, 6306P. You'll note in here they've highlighted some additions to this policy, and this is just a cleanup, routine kind of cleanup measures taken here, but it details the purpose of a child find, which is in the policy, and then the procedures outline the processes for child find. And so the board will be asked to hear the policy on first reading under action items. Next, we have the Head Start program. The program ended the year with 131 children enrolled. For the 21-22 school year, the program has 123 completed applications, and the program will continue to take applications through the summer. Families are still uncertain as to whether or not to enroll their children in preschool, so we're seeing a little slow measures there, but we do anticipate a stronger interest once the older children start the new school year. It's been interesting times. For personnel, the program's interviewing internal staff for the part-day classroom that's being converted to a full-day classroom for the 21-22 school year. And they have they're interviewing potential new staff for other program openings. The program received the NOA for the 21-22 continuation grant application for $2,482,967, which will serve 169 children. There's no change from the previous year. The program renewed the TANF contract for $145,264 to serve 14 children in the 21-22 school year. This was also the same as the previous year. So the delivery options for the 21-22 school year are as follows. There will be 5 full-day classrooms, which is an increase of a full-day classroom. These classrooms will operate for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 972 hours or 162 days of a year. The program has a waiver from the required 1,020 hours per year. There are 104-year-old slots, which are 55% of the program enrollment, and at least 45% of the enrollment slots are required to be full day. The first day of school for the full day program is August 23rd, and the last day will be June 1st, 2022. That still leaves 5 part-day classrooms, 3 of which will be 3-year-old rooms and 2 will be 4-year-old classrooms. They will operate 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, 128 days per year. There are 48 3-year-old slots and 35 4-year-old slots. The first day of school for the part-day program is August 31st, and the last day will be May 25th. And now we have Ms. Kim Baumgart here, our Children's Service Manager, and she's going to present to you the Child Spring Outcomes Report.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So I'm not sure how to work this. There we go. Just for a little bit of background information, these are the domains that we work in, what we base our teaching and what we base our assessment on in these 6 categories. So social, emotional, we're really working a lot on self-regulation, helping kids to develop positive relationships with others and to work cooperatively and constructively with other kids in their classroom as well. Approaches to learning is the positive approaches to learning, being persistent, having initiative, being motivated to learn, sticking with things, remembering and connecting, remembering what they're learning and connecting it to what they already know and to what they'll be learning. Classification skills and using symbols and images to represent. Language looks at both under the expressive language as well as the receptive language, their ability to understand and their ability to express themselves in both in conversation and communication skills. We also look at building their skills in large motor activities as well as fine motor. In math, we look at number operations and concepts, spatial relationships where things are in space as well as the names and attributes of shapes. We also look at patterns and comparing and measuring. In literacy, we look at phonological awareness, knowledge of the alphabet, knowledge of print, and being able to comprehend and respond to the books and texts that we work with, as well as developing their writing skills, which is not handwriting, but the ability to start using their hands for different kinds of tasks so that they can have the refinement in their small muscles to be able to do the handwriting when it comes time for that to happen. We've did things a little bit differently this year, trying to be prepared for a return from being closed down the previous year and having children come back after COVID. So in our first cycle of assessment, we usually look at all 6 of those areas. In the first cycle, we looked at those which are foundational for learning. We wanted to be sure that we were giving them a strong social emotional foundation, building those skills that would help them to be better ready to learn, and also building language that supports that learning. So that's what we really spent a lot of time on teaching and assessing. And then in the second and third cycles, we continued with those and then added in the physical, math, and literacy, because we just wanted to be sure that foundation was there. With having children less, we wanted to be sure we had what they really needed, most importantly, to go to kindergarten. This is the assessment tool that we use. Teaching Strategies Assessment. It is aligned with our curriculum, And it's based on what research says are what children should do at a certain time in their life, at a certain age. It's more of a range rather than a point. As you can see, those color bands all reflect a different age group, because children follow the same progression for the most part, but they follow it at their own pace. So a child can have skills here and have skills here and still fall within what we would expect them to in different areas. So we collect information on the children through observation and through parent input, and then that information is entered into this online system, and we rate the children where we feel they fall, and then that all goes into the reports that we eventually come up with that give us some answers as to where we're at and where we're heading. One of the reports that we look at is a snapshot report, so it's one we do 3 times a year. We just combine everything in that report and shows us for that first third of the year, where are our children now? Where is that base? That's where we set our baseline. And then 2 more times per year, we do the same thing again. And we're able to use the other report, the growth report, to compare those ratings. The snapshot helps us to see where kids are in terms of whether they're below, meeting, or exceeding expectations. The growth looks rather than at where they're exactly at right there. Did they make the amount of growth we would have expected? So we may have a child who entered at the bottom end of that meeting expectations and is still in meeting expectations, but they moved within that. So we know that they've made that growth. And that helps us to see where our kids are at, but also whether we're giving them sufficient to make the growth that they would need or should be making at their age level. And these are, sorry about that. These are the snapshot reports for the entire year, for the first 3 areas that we looked at: social, emotional, language, and approaches to learning. What we hope to see is, what we expect to see is that the numbers in the below categories are going to be higher because children are just now starting. So we don't expect them all to be right there at that level. And then we hope that over the year, the below numbers will go down and the meeting and exceeding will go up, which is pretty much what we found, is what we were hoping to find. I think we didn't see as much decline in children as we had expected with COVID. They came in without as much impact as we had anticipated, but some impact, and that's why we wanted this to be there. So you can see that the numbers up in the did increase as the year went by. And then these are on a different report because we did not collect data during the fall. We don't have those baseline numbers. So our winter numbers for physical literacy and math are actually a little bit higher than they normally would have been if we'd been looking at fall, but still within those, we're able to see that over time the numbers went down in the below and they went up in meeting and exceeding. We do see that math and literacy are and have been our lower areas that we've been working on, but these are lower even than they were in the past. But those are the areas that we did not spend as much time on. And we feel like spending that time in those other areas will help them to pick that up as they move on to next year for their 4-year-old year or kindergarten, because they have those foundational skills. Our growth report comes out looking at 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds separately. And our 3-year-olds, for some reason, tend to make greater growth. And not exactly sure what that is, if it's a little bit of 3-year-old teachers not expecting as much, or if it just is that they have more growth to make during that period. So that's something we'll continue to look at. But in social and emotional, from fall to spring, these are the only areas we're able to do this reporting, and it won't let us go from the beginning to the end, only from the beginning to the mid or the beginning, or won't let us go from the mid points. So, but we did see that the amount of growth we would have expected to see was met by 87% of our 3-year-olds and 76% of our 4-year-olds. For language, it was met by 87% of our 3-year-olds and 79% of 4-year-olds. And for the cognitive, which is the math and literacy, it went they went from 16% below to 84%, meeting or exceeding for 3-year-olds, and from 29 to 71 for the 4-year-olds. So we did see most children making growth. And if I go back and, when I go back and look at those numbers, those individual children who are in the below, they're typically children who either have a delay, so they're already a little bit behind, as is their pattern of growth, or they're children who had a lot of attendance issues and just were not there enough for us to be able to make that big of a difference for them. Or children who had major behavior that got in the way of their learning. These are our school readiness goals for this year, and for this, they're the same as they were last year, and will probably stay the same for the remainder of the grant cycle. The top line are 3-year-olds, as indicated by the turtle with 3 on them. Have to get some early childhood stuff in there. And I have to tell you that because when I looked at it again, I didn't realize that, I didn't remember I'd done that. No one knew it was 3- and 4-year-olds, so. So in approaches to learning, 100% of our 3-year-olds met that school readiness goal, which was, I believe, 85, I don't have it on there, but it was 85% of our children would meet that goal. So 100% of our 3-year-olds met our approaches to learning goal, 99% of our 4-year-olds. In social emotional, 100% of our 3-year-olds met, and 82% met the first objective, which is, I believe, I didn't separate that out either, is the part of learning self-regulation, and the other then is applying those replacement skills. And then for language and literacy, again, we were over the 85% for our 3-year-olds, over for part of it. So about 87% of our 4-year-olds were able to meet the goal of recognizing letters, and then 63% were able to associate the sounds with those letters. In math and science, 98% of our children met the goal that were 3, and 75% of the 4-year-olds. And then perceptual motor, we really focused in on the fine motor piece of it, because that's tended to be low in the last several years. And 98% and 100% on those goals, and then 97 and 95% for the 4-year-olds. So the only area that we were below what we set for a goal was that one piece of literacy for the 4-year-olds, which we're working on with some of those kids in our summer camp right now. And then we looked at what we want to be able to do moving forward to make sure that we are meeting those goals in all of those areas. Integrated reliability was assigned to all of our new staff or those who's had expired. It's good for 3 years. That is through the TS Gold Company. And some of them were not completed, so that will be a requirement for those people for next year as well as our new people. We also, the teachers have requested additional training in how to collect their data, in making sure at which they've made great gains in making sure that their data is not just a copy of what's on their lesson plans, but it's actually showing not just what they did, but how the children responded to that. So they're able to use that more in their planning, and then making sure that all components are there. They feel like they've made gains, but they want some more training. Our professional learning communities, this year and last year, we really worked on looking at our data, analyzing it, and doing some planning. We've done that 3 times a year. Next year, we are going to be holding those meetings monthly for a couple of hours, and we'll be adding in looking at how we can increase the intentionality in our lesson plans. There is some connection now, but we want to be sure that we're really meeting the needs of those children most of the time, if not all of the time. So we want to work on that intentionality. And Head Start has a tool to help us be able to do that. Plus, we'll be using some of the professional learning community materials that the school district will be using next year as well. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Kim.
She did mention that there's a summer camp going. You know, we don't call it summer school. It's summer camp. I believe you have 40 students? almost 40. So 36 students that are going to the summer camp, and it's going Monday through Thursday through July 1st. And so over at the Head Start building, so they're offering some other opportunities there. And then I'll put a plug in too for the elementary. We are having a summer, we call it Summer Inspirations Academy for kindergarten through the students who've completed kindergarten through 5th grade. And that's being held at Lewis and Clark Elementary, and it started on Monday, and we have 325 students going to our Summer Inspirations Academy over there, and they're having a blast. So if you want to, have some fun, go over there between 8:30 and 11:30, and you can do some science and some hands-on math and all kinds of fun stuff. All right, next is the Idaho Food Bank report, and it's in your packet there. You'll note that we have 605 packets distributed in May. The food bank has picked up the extra packets and will be distributing those. Next is the kindergarten registration, which it's in your addendum because the numbers keep changing all the time, and we wanted to be sure we had the most up to date, which is 656, which we beat last year. So we're watching that and just, hoping for more and more. So feeling good about things and really watching those numbers and as they keep filling out those online registrations. You had mentioned earlier in the budget there's also online registration for kindergarten, but also for other students that are new to the district or returning to the district. And I just counted before we came in today, and of the new registrations, there were 50 of them that were coming from students that were coming either homeschooled or they were from a virtual setting last year. So that was in the elementary level. So we're tracking those also so we can watch those very closely. And then next you'll see the nursing acuity report. And you'll note there, we have talked before about how a lot of the nursing services are for our elementary diabetic students who need help controlling their diabetes. And so one of the things I noted in here was that there were 8 level 4s, which that, was an increase there, but less in the level 3. So some of our learners with some significant needs for nursing services. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Next up, Sue Pettit. Bunch of policies.
Start today and today.
Wow. Yeah.
So just a quick summer school for secondary so far. We have recouped 522 credits for our students, and right now there's about 650 kids in summer school. We started the year out with 800, and some have finished and moved on, some never started, but there's about 650 right now, so it's a busy summer for us. For policy and procedure, we're just cleaning up a couple of policies and procedures. For the report card, there was nothing in there about our electronic versions of our report cards, and so it still said that we were handing paper copies, and that the majority of that's not happening. The parents are pulling up the report cards on our student information system, and if they need a hard copy, we'll print a hard copy for them, but the majority of it's just picking up for electronic. So that's that cleanup for that policy 6502. And then the phone policy, or it's our student use for personal electronic devices. Our policy, we've checked with our attorney, and it is not enforceable. It is actually, we were holding phones for kids on repeat offenders. We were holding them for 2 to 5 to 7 days, and we cannot legally do that. So we are actually adopting the ISBA's student electronic policy. So all of that cleanup that looks messy in there, that's literally their policy put into our policy. So, and then you have an early graduation request. We have a junior who is actually finishing their classes up this summer, and if they finish them before the beginning of next year, it is considered a full year early. So they are requesting to graduate this summer. Okay.
Good.
Questions? Okay,
No,
that's it.
Thank you. Tanya Wilkes.
Good evening. So I have a couple of things on the list today. We have an overnight out-of-state with the Highland High School yearbook. They're going next week. So we'd like that to get approved so they can go participate in that. And then extracurricular participation fees. We tried to give you last year's 2019-20 and then 2020-21 comparison. We're pretty on track. We were expecting, participation numbers to drop, but if you notice that they didn't drop too bad. We do need to continue to collect some fees, and we're working on that. Typically, when they start coming in and picking up those diplomas, we get those fees, so.
Okay, so these are maybe from a junior,
Mhm.
they'll continue through next year and we'll catch them.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And we're still working on opportunities to help support them as well.
yeah.
Okay, and then we have a couple of camp requests. We got a wrestling camp and a couple other, dance and soccer camp in the next couple months here to finish out. We're doing really strong in our camps. We're having record numbers coming out of, I don't know if you saw social media with the Highland track camp. There were hundreds of little ones up there participating in that track meet up there. So the little ones are coming out in full force and giving our high school athletes a run for their money. It's good.
There's a track meet tomorrow.
Yes.
Good.
Any questions?
You think that it's gonna slow down, but it's really busy.
Yeah. I know, all of our football's going full swing. Volleyball camps are over. Century had 20 plus more than they've ever had, and so did Pokey. And they were even at the same time, so kids are just wanting to get out, so it's been awesome. It's been really good. Okay?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Business operations, Bart, you're gonna speak to us again.
One more time.
This was probably the best report I've ever seen.
Do you want to stand up and jump for joy, Mrs. Craner? I figured you would really love that. So our Idaho General Fund Revenue Report, just a fantastic month in May. Part of that is attributable, well, I shouldn't say part, the majority of that is attributable to the fact that the federal government extended the tax deadline from April to May. And so a lot of those tax collections did not occur. You see that we fell short a little bit in April, and that moved to May. But overall, we're sitting at $670 million ahead of projected budget at the state level. And most likely, when we get done with this month that we're in right now, when we report next month, that'll be over $700 million, which is really unprecedented for the state. So that's a great sign. We hope that it keeps going in that direction. Really nothing new to report on the eligibility percentages, so I won't really make too much comment there, other than maybe as an aside to say that our summer feeding program, which kind of pertains to this, started this summer, and on average we are feeding around 2,000 individuals at the parks that we have established, and so things have been going very well, other than it has been very hot very early in the year. So we can probably anticipate a little bit more of that as we look at our weather forecast. Lastly, our negative balance report. We don't talk about this too often, but this is the amount of uncollected funds that we have from people charging the mills. And of course, everything has been free for the last year plus. And so that balance has actually dropped just a little bit, just because we're not really charging mills for the most part. So
So we still have, are these carryovers from the past, or?
a lot of those balances are carryovers from maybe a year to maybe 2 years, or maybe even older than that. But we try to keep that down. We try to work with families to collect those outstanding charges that have been made for meals. But overall, it's much better than you remember. A dozen years ago or so, we were sitting up around $60,000 negative balance. So we feel pretty good about around $3,000 right now. Okay.
And the prognosis regarding going forward, the free meals will end they've ended now, or they will
No.
carry?
To bring you up to speed with that is that the initial indication was that the start of the new school year, we would begin the process over again with free and reduced and the applications. but the federal government did extend that due to the extension of COVID and that carrying on a little bit. So all of this next fiscal year, currently, what we know, will be free meals for all children up to June 30th of '22.
Wow, okay.
So, okay,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah, thank you. Let's see. Where we at now? Oh, Carl. Okay, employee services.
Yeah, we won't spend a lot of time on my section of the agenda tonight either, but, you know, Infinite Campus, technology, IC updates, not a lot of new news to report to you, other than we do have an IC upload that we are currently working on. Started out with only 300 and some odd errors, and so we're real happy about that one. Especially knowing that, we've had to do a little bit of improvising on special ed reporting, because our guru happened to leave and look for greener pastures. So anyway, with that being said, we're in the midst of that, and we should have that hopefully done tomorrow. And we're looking forward to having that done for another year. Then we have our summer school report we have to do in August. And our wellness dashboard, you can see that we had a extraordinary month in the way of claims, 117%. As Shauna and I were looking over the reports today, we had a very, very large claim, $300,000 plus, and we weren't aware of anybody who was in the hospital for a length of time, but it was a very large claim. And so that was the principal reason for our high percentage this month. And one good thing about high claims is sometimes they aren't considered in our renewal because of the amount of the money that is in that claim. So we will watch that one, and hopefully it will work out in the end that it's not going to be an issue for us in our renewal next year. So with that, unless you have other questions or comments, I will conclude my section of the agenda and we can move on.
Thanks, Carl. Human Relations report will be rolled into July. The next on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Okay, again,
What
for
we're doing.
tonight, I just have a calendar for you, and it looks a little light.
It does. I looked through it, I didn't add anything to my calendar.
Right, so a board meeting, and you've got a couple of Independence Day actual and recognized, and then Ed Foundation, and then that brings us back to regular meeting. If I might just throw this out, we anticipate July being pretty much routine items, and so we wondered if the board would be interested in moving up the time frame to earlier in the afternoon rather than an evening meeting.
Yeah, I already answered. I'm all
Yep.
for it.
If you'll just let Renee know if that would be acceptable, we could bump it up.
Yep.
And then maybe adding in a meeting perhaps next week with anticipation of negotiations starting. We would likely have the board in to visit about progress as we move through that process, and pick up maybe a couple of executive sessions. So we will be checking your availability for next week. Potentially, or hopefully, looking at ratification by the end of next week. We have 3 dates, I think, that we're working with. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, I believe. So we'll keep the board informed and likely, again, bring you in maybe a couple times next week if we could.
I do have a question about, like, the tour we had today. Anything we will do?
So anytime that we are looking at potentially making some purchases or sales or something,
That's exactly.
then we would have an executive session and bring you in to talk about that.
Okay.
So we can be looking at that for next week as
Okay.
well, or, yeah.
You need
Again,
a little,
We'll see what your availability is.
yeah, you need a little direction, huh?
Yeah.
Good.
Yep, always.
Always helps. Is that it for you?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is public written comment pertinent to agenda action items, and I have not received any requests, and nobody's here, so we'll move on. Now to action items. The first item of business is to hear the first reading on the following policies. Policy 6306, 6502, and 8506. Is there a motion?
I move we hear on first reading the aforementioned policies.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hearing all in the positive, that motion is passed. The next item is to approve the early graduation request.
Hereby move that the board approve the early graduation request as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed. Next item is to approve the out-of-state overnight travel requests. Is there a motion?
I hereby move that the board approve the out-of-state and overnight travel requests as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion is passed. The next, or the last item is, last item is to approve the camp request. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the camp requests.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed. And I'd like to adjourn. Is there a motion out there?
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We win.